Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
Last night, when signing the executive orders declaring the cartels foreign terrorist organizations, the president was asked about boots on the ground. Take a listen.
President Trump, if cartels are now going to be seen as foreign terror organizations, would you think about ordering U.S. Special Forces into Mexico to take them out?
Could happen. Stranger things have happened.
This is actually an executive order designating the cartels and other organizations to be foreign terrorist organizations.
That's a big one.
Yes, sir.
People have wanted to do this for years. So they are now designated as terrorist organizations, foreign. And Mexico probably doesn't want that. But we have to do what's right.
All right, Jonathan, when he says stranger things have happened, what does it look like, assuming the president declares war, and he has a lot of powers to do that, with Congress, depending on how it works, of targeted drone strikes on cartel leaders, Navy SEAL raids, Delta Force, whatever it is, raids on drug lab production facilities, fentanyl trafficking organizations?
Well, first of all, Leland, he doesn't have to declare war because these individuals are on a terrorist list now. The United States is technically in a offensive as well as defensive position now, and they can bring all of the assets the United States has to bear, which includes intel, military, and also the white collar aspect of this, because people have to realize these cartels are businesses. If they're not making money, they're not going to exist. And so now the United States can look at them the same way they look at Iran, for instance, and go after their financials. Although the difference here is that primarily cartels are a cash business, but they can start to go after them and the nations in which they're in and put pressure on them and start working this systematically. When I was in Colombia, we led training missions, and we were not allowed to go in there as a military operation
I get that.
because it was a law enforcement
operation. I get that,
operation.
Jonathan. My question, though, is how difficult really is it? I mean, when we think about these cartels, and they are gangs, in many cases, they have armies that are better equipped than, say, the Mexican military. But it wouldn't really take that much, would it, if the order was given to go down to Mexico and start knocking some heads, a few drone strikes, a couple raids, and the cartels might have a problem recruiting people all of a sudden, wouldn't they?
Well, it could be, but see, the cartels are involved in the intimidation process of a lot of these states, the neighborhoods, the people that work down there. So when you look at the people who work for the cartel, there's a difference between those individuals, the soldiers for the cartel, and the leaders, the actual business leaders of the cartel. So they're going to define all these things. If they just went down there and tried to start knocking heads, you're going to get into a quagmire because you just push them into the shadows. And so we have to look at this systematically, which I believe Trump will do. And as far as the border goes and the immigrants, you can see that the border, every drug case that I was ever a part of in the FBI went back either to the Canadian border or to the southern border, but they always involved cartels or drug organization, criminal enterprises outside of the United States.
Jonathan, excuse me for interrupting you. President Trump just talked about this a few minutes ago. Take a listen.
Canada, very much so. They've allowed millions and millions of people to come into our country that shouldn't be here. They could have stopped them, and they didn't. And they've killed 300,000 people last year, my opinion, have been destroyed by drugs, by fentanyl. The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive. The fentanyl coming through Mexico is massive. And people are getting killed, and families are being destroyed.
If President Trump, and it seems to be in the process of, quote unquote, sealing the southern border, how much of a crimp does that put on the cartels that may make going after their drug trade easier?
It makes a tremendous impact, or it is a tremendous impact on their ability to move their product if we look at this as a business, into the United States, which is their biggest buyer. And so blocking the border, putting a wall there on the southern border means that you are causing their main delivery avenue a disruption. So that is exactly what we need to start doing, is looking at these individual ways. But I have to point this out, Leland. This is not, now because they've designated these individuals as terrorists, it's not just a law enforcement issue. It's now a national security issue. And so that puts all the assets at play, which is way different than the cartel issue in Colombia before this issue arose.
You think about it just in terms of terrorism, it's about time, right? You at some point with fentanyl deaths, you're having a 9/11 every 11 days.
The president's push for mass deportations has migrants deeply concerned on what is to come. Major cities like Chicago are anticipating massive immigration raids that could begin at any moment. Elected leaders say they will do anything they can to protect the many immigrant communities.
Ripping those families apart, not acceptable to Americans. And we're going to stand up for them in the state of Illinois.
We want folks to know that they can still send their children to school.
Organizations like Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights telling anyone who is scared, don't answer the door if ICE agents come knocking, and memorize loved ones' phone numbers in case your phones are seized. Meantime, a long-anticipated threat in the fight against drug cartels has become a reality. President Trump officially designating them as foreign terrorist organizations. This decision previously facing opposition from Mexican leaders. NewsNation's Jorge Ventura joining us with more on this from Texas. Jorge, good morning to you. What does this new designation mean for the fight against these dangerous cartels?
Well, Marnie, good morning. Now, with this designation, Mexican cartels now will be joining a list of foreign terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. It is a move that can actually make it politically easier for President Trump to send U.S. troops to Mexico without the approval of Congress. Now, this designation will target criminal organizations like the Sinaloa and the Jalisco New Generations cartels, which are involved in human trafficking, violent crimes, but also fueling the fentanyl crisis here in the United States. Now, under U.S. law, this designation does allow the U.S. government to freeze cartel money, ban travel, and punish anyone helping these criminal groups. Officials say that Mexican cartel operations across the border threaten U.S. safety and security. Now, Mexican leaders, including former President López Obrador and President Sheinbaum, are opposing the move, fearing that it could justify U.S. military action on U.S. soil. And when asked whether U.S. forces could be sent to Mexico when he was signing those executive orders, Marnie, Trump did say that it could happen. Right now, we'll just have to wait and see, Marnie.
Jorge, are there other groups that are targeted under this designation, or is it solely focused on the cartels?
So in that new executive order, President Trump is also targeting MS-13, that's the Salvadoran gang, as a foreign terrorist organization, but also adding the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. According to Border Czar Tom Holman, who did speak with NewsNation back in December, he says that Tren de Aragua gang is already active in 16 states. And here in Texas, the Venezuelan gang already has an active presence in El Paso, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. Now, according to President Trump, he says he will use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign criminal networks here in the United States through the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which does allow the U.S. government to round up foreigners who are citizens of a country that Congress has declared war on or has engaged in invasion. Now, President Trump on Monday also declared an official emergency on the southern border, saying, quote, cartels control vast territories just south of our southern border, effectively controlling who can and cannot travel to the United States from Mexico. Hundreds of thousands of Americans have tragically died from drug overdoses because of the illicit narcotics that have flowed across the southern border. For now, that the decision to intensify the battle against U.S. cartels will most likely get some pushback, Marnie, from President Claudia Sheinbaum, who says she does oppose it. And just about 30 minutes ago in her morning brief conference, she did say that Mexico is a sovereign nation, Marnie.
All right, Jorge Ventura, thank you for that update. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.
All right, the targets of Donald Trump's ire across the country and around the world are scrambling to prepare for what happens after he retakes office. And that includes the mullahs of Iran and, of course, the cartels of Mexico. Mass deportations and military force against the cartels are just two things that Donald Trump has promised during his campaign. And with that comes the concern that the cartels will try to use the opportunity between now and Inauguration Day to smuggle as many people as they can across the border. That means the possibility of a surge in smuggling, and that's just people. Don't forget about the drugs. NewsNation's checking in at three busy border sectors, the Tucson, El Paso, and Del Rio sectors, to see what is happening as these border states await the new Trump presidency. Border correspondent Ali Bradley joins us live. Ali, what are you hearing in these border towns now that the election's over?
Yeah, hey, Elizabeth, we're already seeing things actually ramping up here. So where we are, we're now in the El Paso sector. We're in Sunland Park. This is technically New Mexico. We are literally standing on the border with Mexico. So this is Mexico right here. This is where the wall ends. You can see the boundary here. The wall just ends. These people are running across. We just saw a guy literally clear these railroad tracks and disappear off into that community over there, which is Sunland Park. Now, when we come back around here, Chris, let's show them up here what this ridge looks like. So, you guys, we've been watching smuggling vehicles and smugglers up on this ridge. This is where we see them operate every day that we're down here. And these are kind of like makeshift stash houses. They're going to bring illegal immigrants in there, leave them in there for a couple hours until they have clearance, basically to a green light to go. And then they'll send them down and they run into that community. So, speaking of stash houses, look what we experienced yesterday in the Tucson sector. This is another busy sector here as we visit three sectors in 3 days. We were there as law enforcement were searching a home. We're actually carrying out a warrant, a search warrant. You can see their guns drawn here. You can see in this situation in Cochise County where human smuggling is ramping up, these people were in a stash house. So there was 9 individuals from Mexico in a detached garage in the back. Now, this detached garage couldn't have been bigger than a 1-car garage. 9 people were in there, 3 women, 2 juveniles. There was clothes scattered all over the place, food discarded. The smell was just putrid. It was pretty intolerable, and these weren't conditions that you would wish on your worst enemy. So what is happening there? We were only about 100 yards from the border wall. Take a listen to what the sheriff had to say about what the cartel is doing and what they're going to be doing.
They're going to push hard right now, the cartels. They know they have to. They have a president coming in that's made it very clear, and based on his track record, he will secure this border. He'll declare it an emergency based on what we've had for the last 4 years, and which means it'll seal that border. So the cartels aren't stupid. It's a business. They're going to be pushing their dope through here, their illicit drugs, you name it, to include trafficking people, smuggling people.
So, Elizabeth, the cartel's a $13 billion a year industry. Back in 2018, it was $500 million. They were moving drugs then. Now they figured out people are very lucrative. So, yeah, we're probably going to see them pushing more people across and more smuggling once Trump gets in because they're not going to be able to walk across anymore. We're heading to the Del Rio sector. We'll be there tomorrow showing you what we find here tonight, but also showing you what they're dealing with in Eagle Pass because groups of 300 are crossing there once again. We've seen it. And the National Guard there in Texas has actually been deploying pepper balls to deter those migrants. Elizabeth, we'll bring you that tomorrow.
All right, Ali, looking forward to it. Thanks so much. Ali Bradley reporting live from the border.
And now to the southern border, where the U.S. government is ramping up its covert aerial surveillance program in an effort to win the war against Mexican drug cartels. The New York Times reporting the CIA has expanded secret drone flights over Mexico in an effort to find fentanyl labs. NewsNation's border correspondent Ali Bradley is live for us. So, Ali, how does all of this work?
Yeah, hey, Nicole. So these Reaper drones are on the hunt right now in Mexico. They're covertly looking for these criminal cartel organizations and their fentanyl labs. So what we know right now is that the president has promised to designate them as terrorists. But right now, that is still something that they are mulling over and dealing with. They have not signed that executive order. So we're seeing these kind of surveillance drones, if you will, crossing that international airspace. And they're big. They're MQ-9 Reaper drones. And they're carrying out these stealth missions. And they're not currently armed, but they can actually carry payloads for precision strikes. This is a move, though, that has been used by the U.S. to target suspected terrorists in other countries. We're talking about Syria and Iraq. But the CIA has not been authorized to use the drones to take lethal action. Officials told the New York Times that they do not envision the drones conducting airstrikes over in Mexico. For now, CIA officers in Mexico are passing information that is being collected by these drones to officials in Mexico. They are adamant about finding these fentanyl labs, which apparently emit chemicals, and that's what makes them easier to find from the air and why they're using these drones. A source familiar with the matter told one news outlet that these recent flights were communicated to Congress using a notification reserved for new or updated covert programs that the CIA intends to conceal or deny. This, of course, signals an escalation. The CIA has reportedly flown surveillance drones to hunt cartels inside Mexico under at least one small program that partnered with Mexican authorities. But the New York Times reports that this began as a secret program under the Biden administration. So this isn't necessarily brand new. The more recent flights, though, were communicated to Congress by the Trump administration using a particular notification, like I said, is reserved for these programs. But the issue is the notifications made no mention of Mexican partners. Again, this signals that escalation across the border. So we talked with Darren Gobb. He is a geopolitical strategist and a U.S. Army veteran, and he's a former Black Hawk pilot. He talks about the CIA's covert drone missions in Mexico. Take a listen.
Can't really get into specifically too much, but let's just say that a lot of that stuff was in some ways perfected during our counterinsurgency fights and things overseas, Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere. So if they are used along our side of the border, they can see quite a bit. That would be very useful for the intelligence community to put together a picture of what's happening.
So the Mexican government has taken some steps to address what's going on the other side of the border. Of course, fentanyl production. We know that there are a lot fewer people crossing the border illegally right now. We know that they're tamping down on some of those fentanyl labs, but they're also deploying up to 10,000 troops along their northern border, which, of course, Nicole, is our southern border. So Mexico is trying to do its part, but, of course, the Trump administration wants them to do more when it comes to the fight against fentanyl. Nicole.
All right, so, Allie, let's talk about your report yesterday that Border Patrol agents were stopping the use of body cameras because of possible detection by criminals, but it sounds like this move is now being reversed.
Yeah, so we actually reported just yesterday that these body cameras were being, the agents were being told to stand down from using these in the field effective immediately. Now, that order came out on Friday that alerted Border Patrol agents and other law enforcement across the nation that this could potentially be an issue. And one of the biggest problems with it was that it could potentially, the radio frequency being emitted from these body-worn cameras could potentially trip off improvised explosive devices. But there were also social media posts circulating that they could actually tap into these systems in a certain way and actually track these agents and officers while they're out in the field, of course, making the user, the agent, more vulnerable and allowing the bad guy essentially to avoid those law enforcement individuals. So obviously an issue there. But Nicole, I did reach out to Axon, who is a manufacturer. I also reached out to CBP to find out what was the outcome of that investigation. What were the solutions there? What did they do? Or how are they making sure that the agents using these cameras are safe, and also so that the civilians around are safe as well, and that they're being held accountable when they're out there with these agents and officers? So have not heard back yet, Nicole, but of course we will report anything that we learn.
All right, Allie Bradley live there in Del Rio, Texas.
Authorities recently discovered what some are calling a ranch of horrors after finding thousands of bone fragments, items of clothing, and alleged underground ovens possibly used to cremate bodies. This discovery has shocked the nation, which has struggled for years with mysterious disappearances. According to government data, more than 124,000 people are missing in Mexico, largely as a result of drug cartel violence, and most cases are never solved. Survivors of this alleged cartel extermination camp have shared that they were lured to the ranch by being told they could earn themselves a visa. Joining me now is author of Seeing a Guide to Mexico's Deadliest Cartel and director at World of Crime, Chris Dalby. Chris, there are so many questions that I have for you here. Just the description alone is enough to put someone at ease, ill at ease. Break this down for us, why this is as horrible as believed.
Look, this is not an unprecedented event in Mexico. Sadly, these death camps do pop up occasionally, with hundreds of bodies believed to have been buried there. The reason that this one is particularly shocking is that over 200 pairs of shoes, IDs, even children's toys, were found on this site. This was in a remote part of Mexico, but not too far away from one of the major cities, Guadalajara. It was raided in last October by Mexican authorities who didn't see anything to suggest the scale of murder that was going on there. So you're either talking about staggering incompetence or high-level government corruption that allowed hundreds of people to be taken to this place, killed, murdered, and then and their bodies then burned.
And Chris, I'm just looking at some of the numbers that we were talking about there, and it's just staggering. And I'm sure there are many investigations actively into these cartel organizations. What do you think will come from this specific investigation?
Not much, I have to say. Over a decade now of researching organized crime, we see events like this come up regularly, massacres that capture global attention, that shock people, that lead the Mexican government to pledge that this time they will be different, that this time they will crack down, and nothing ever changes. Sadly, the Jalisco Cartel New Generation, the CJNG, for who this site belonged, has been linked to the overwhelming majority of cartel violence in the last decade. They have killed tens of thousands of people. And yes, some of their leaders have been arrested, some of their leaders have been killed and extradited. It hasn't made a difference. The money that these cartels can generate, the amount of people that they can recruit or kill at will with almost complete impunity is not going to change, no matter how shocking and gruesome this discovery is.
Well, then, Chris, the obvious question is what can be done about the cartel epidemic, not only in Mexico, but also right here in America?
Look, from my take, there's two things that need to be done. One is much closer cooperation. Right now, the US and Mexico are at loggerheads on security policy, and I understand why from both sides, but that doesn't help. These, there has to be much more data sharing, much more information sharing, much more joint efforts to go after finances as much as going after people. Killing and arresting people is fine. Seizing drugs obviously is highly necessary, but that doesn't choke off what cartels need to survive, which is money. So going after the finances, long-term, multi-year operations to choke the way the cartels are funded and launder money, for me, is the most effective way of doing it.
And Chris, the name of your book, once again, is CJNG, A Guide to Mexico's Deadliest Cartel, and you are the director at World of Crime. Chris, from your expertise, do you think they will be able to tie this ranch directly to any specific people within the cartel?
So absolutely, this ranch belongs to the CJNG, the group that I wrote about in my book, and by far the deadliest cartel in Mexico. It's difficult to tie it to specific people because this is really heartland of Jalisco territory. This was an hour away from Guadalajara in the mountains. There's no other cartel that operates in that area. This is an area where the CJNG can operate, train its people, and kill its victims with complete impunity. So even if you connect it to specific people and you're able to arrest specific people, it's likely that those are going to be low-level or mid-ranking operatives that were at the site, not the people who are actually giving the orders to kill these victims.
And Chris, how comfortable were people talking to you as you gathered information for your book?
So it depends who you're talking to. Of course, if you're talking to the victims, the families of the victims, it's important to note this ranch was raided in October by the police who saw nothing. Then an organization of victims' relatives who are digging all around Mexico, trying to find the remains of their loved ones, they're the ones who found that site.
Joining us live tonight is a man who knows the cartel like the back of his hand, former Sinaloa cartel kingpin, Margarito J. Flores Jr. Thank you so much for joining us. I understand why you are wearing glasses and a mask. It is incredibly brave to speak to us tonight. I do want to start with the report we just saw about Sebastian. Put into perspective for us how life-threatening this work is, how important it is.
Oh, I mean, the fact that he even came on your show says a lot. It's scary because he's actually still in the field, still working undercover and putting his life at risk to save, women who are being and young children who are being trafficked by these drug cartels and other criminal organizations. So it's dangerous. I actually myself worked undercover, and it's probably the most scariest thing to do, and it shows a lot about his bravery and why he does it. So thanks to Sebastian.
If you could send a message to President Trump tonight, what is one thing you would want him to know about the cartels? One thing that you feel is not being taken into account enough?
You know what? I share this in all of my seminars that I actually do. That it's going to take a multi-phase approach. It's not just about labeling these cartels as terrorist organizations. I think that's a great tool, but I think what no one ever looks at or fails to realize is that the drug trafficking is a business. So the war on drugs, it's okay to look at it as a military type group or to take military type actions against it, but it's a business, and I think that it's going to take a little bit more, and it's going to take a collaborative effort, not just in the border and in Mexico, but also in the United States. With my background, I was born and raised in Chicago. I always say that I was American made before I even stepped foot or came to meet any of the drug lords of the Sinaloa cartel. I was already a very successful kingpin in the United States, in a city like Chicago. And I think that what we fail to realize is that there's a lot more American drug distributors in the United States and in Mexico. I think that drug distribution in the United States and Canada and all around the world, scores any drug cartel in Mexico by far.
Yeah.
So I think that
I think to your point, and I don't mean to interrupt here, but there's a notion that it is the cartel coming up from the southern border and infiltrating communities, and you say that is true, and also there are American-born operatives who are turning and working for the cartels. You were one of them, along with your brother in Chicago, I know. What is one thing you can tell us about working for El Chapo and El Mayo that would surprise us?
That regardless of what anyone thinks, that the Mexican drug cartels are fearful of the United States government. They are fearful of the prisons and the laws, and they should be fearful of military action or anything that Donald Trump puts into place to combat them. I think it's great that Donald Trump is actually taking, the president's taking a strong stance against Mexican drug cartels. And they are fearful because they know that the laws of the United States ain't the same as in Mexico, that they can't get away with the things that they get away with. And it kind of goes to show that, El Chapo's been, convicted and facing a life sentence, in a Florence prison, and now you have El Mayo in custody.
Yeah. Jay Flores, I wish we had more time. I appreciate speaking with you as always and how you have completely turned your life around, your mission today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Natasha.
And good morning. And with these migrant counters now down along the southern border, agents say that they are ramping up these efforts to dismantle human smuggling operations. But they do say that smugglers are now becoming more sophisticated, now using tunnels as a broader network of illegal entries along the southern border. Now, we got the chance to join the Marine unit in the RGV sector. These agents are viewed as really the first line of defense against illegal immigration and drug trafficking into the U.S. Now, the area that we joined agents was common for smugglers to use rafts to get migrants across the river and onto U.S. soil. But it's not just rafts anymore that agents have to watch for. Smugglers have now taken their operations underground. Along the banks of the Rio Grande, we actually approached a makeshift tunnel that smugglers had been using and building out. They actually even installed a pipe before agents were able to locate this tunnel and then seal it off with cement. Agents tell me that it was only halfway completed and never fully operational, but it is one of the many along the banks of the Rio Grande that smugglers are now adapting their methods along the border. Then smugglers also are now using a drainage system in that same area that's now Border Patrol agents were able to block off with a cage. They had to build out a cage because smugglers were continuing to not only use that drainage system, but they were building out tunnels nearby, and cartel operatives say they're still attempting to repurpose it. You could also see fresh cuts that were being made along that drainage system and the nearby tunnels. Clear signs that smugglers are testing weak points along the border, and smugglers never stop along this system. They're also digging out makeshift tunnels along that drainage system, just finding any entry point to bypass Border Patrol agents. Take a listen from one of the agents from the Marine unit had to say about these tunnels.
Once they start digging holes like that, you gotta be extra careful and not just look at the actual drain, but look around, and that's how we found that other one.
Agents say that they're remaining extra cautious with even more tunnels being built out. Once agents uncovered it, they even found some with 2x4s reinforcing the walls, and even with a wooden door, showing just how much effort has gone into the construction. Agents tell us that smugglers go into the middle of the night attempting to build out these tunnels. What was interesting, Marnie, is this was my first time in my years reporting on the border seeing tunnels along the banks of the Rio Grande. I've only seen the tunnels from the Mexican side in Juarez that led into El Paso. So once again, just showing how smugglers are adapting to the new crackdown on illegal immigration on the border. Marnie.
Right. And to that point, I mean, they are getting more creative, Jorge. They're using the tunnels and also rafts to evade Border Patrol. What are some of the other ways they're staying a step ahead of Border Patrol in all this?
So while we were embedded with the Marine unit, agents say that the Marine unit there in the RGV sector is really one of the most dangerous jobs within Border Patrol. So while migrant encounters on the ground are down and the border is quiet, those agents with the Marine unit are the ones that are actually constantly being watched and monitored by smugglers and cartel scouts on the Mexican side. These scouts and cartel members actually use homes and buildings along the banks of the Rio Grande. These are vantage points to always be constantly monitoring the movements of Border Patrol agents. We were taken nearby this home here, which you're looking at. This is along the banks of the Rio Grande. It is one of the many views by scouts to monitor law enforcement from a distance. Now, the second floor of that home actually had a one-way mirror, which I found extremely interesting. This allowed scouts in that home to watch agents while also going undetected. From there, they also have this advantage of actually communicating to smugglers and scouts exactly where to find those weak points to smuggle those groups of migrants. And it's not smugglers just going underground. They're still using the river too. During our ride-along, Border Patrol agents showed us what they call a landing area. This is where smugglers use rafts to bring migrants across. We can actually still notice fresh footprints in that area, where agents say that that area was actually just used the day before we even arrived. So it's not just tunnels that remain critical crossing points. It's also these landing areas that we got to witness ourselves.
We come here every day, and you'll notice different things on the landings. So, for example, if we come here and check this landing wasn't used yesterday. We come the next day and there's something there.
And Martin, once one of the key kind of differences already from the previous administration to the Trump administration when it comes to illegal immigration is that before, smugglers would actually move in these groups of migrants, and these migrants wanted to turn themselves into Border Patrol agents because they would be paroled into the country. Now, that has completely changed. So smugglers are now smuggling smaller groups of migrants, but they are now looking to completely evade authority. So that's something that authorities say that there now is a bigger focus and shift on under this new administration, Marnie.
All right, Jorge, thank you. Well, this is just into the newsroom. The Trump administration now ratcheting up its battle against Mexican drug cartels and violent transnational criminal organizations. The State Department designating several of these groups as foreign terrorist organizations, and that designation applies to notorious groups like Tren de Aragua, MS-13, and the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels. NewsNation's Ali Bradley is live along the southern border in Del Rio, Texas. So, Ali, what are the implications of this move?
Yeah, hey, Nicole, certainly not coming as a surprise, considering the Trump administration essentially on day one said, hey, we're going to designate the criminal cartels as terrorist organizations and pinpointing Tren de Aragua as well. So we're seeing 8 different groups on this list, 5 of them cartels, which you mentioned, Sinaloa, Jalisco. We also have CDN, CJNG on there. And then we also have these different gangs like Tren de Aragua and MS-13 that the president has said have terrorized communities for years in the United States. So something that is definitely a priority for this administration. Now, when it comes to the designation, we already know the Kingpin Act has been in place and is something that they've had access to, but this ramps it up even further and really allows them to go after their assets, go after these cartels in a different faction. And that includes people that they know, their associates, people that are affiliated with them or family members that might be living in the United States. They are eligible essentially for deportation or removal because of this designation. Now, some of the other consequences include legal ramifications if someone helps a designated FTO, helps one of these terrorist organizations. It also has ramifications for them if they're trying to create transactions with their assets through banks. So they expect the Treasury Department to get involved here as well and go after their assets. So that is one of the priorities for this administration, is to really dismantle these criminal organizations. And Nicole, we know that the DEA has said the cartel is present in all 50 states. So that's going to give them more kind of power to move within the country as well and go after these cartels that are kind of hiding out and utilizing these communities as a kind of safe haven. So that opens up a door for them to do that, and we can expect to see this designation go into place as early as tomorrow. Nicole.
All right, so as early as tomorrow. And then, Allie, there's another change. The catch and release program is now ending. So what is changing here?
Yeah, so if someone is one of the hundreds of thousands of individuals that came in on either parole or was processed without getting a court date or any charging document, you're actually now a target for the Trump administration. So the Biden administration basically had the door open for these people under the parole programs, but the Trump administration says, no, now we want to detain you. A new directive that we obtained through DHS sources actually calls for the detention of all illegal immigrants who are not processed and giving those charging documents. It also directs all ERO personnel to detain anyone who was released into the country under catch and release, and officers should review individuals for redetention if they were released because there was not a significant likelihood of removal in the foreseeable future. But here's the deal. The tables have turned because these individuals can be removed now. There are other countries that have come to the table who are now willing to accept other nationalities that are not from their countries. We're talking about El Salvador and also Costa Rica. So those are elements that are in this fight now. We talked with retired ICE Field Office Director John Fabricatori about this. He says they're using pre-existing laws within the Immigration and Nationality Act. Take a listen to what he said.
A lot of these cases are already on the docket with enforcement removal operations. They're already doing check-ins. Some of them should have probably been processed differently when they came across the border, but because of the limited detention space that we had, instead of them detaining them and actually going through the whole case, they were just released into the interior of the United States. It'll be a lot better process because they'll see the credible fear officer, will make a determination on whether that alien can be eligible for asylum, and then allow them to go through the process, or continued with the expedited removal and remove them from the country.
Okay, so now, Nicole, this impacts about 1.5 million people in just the parole programs alone. We're talking about the CHMV parole program under the Biden administration that allowed nearly 500,000, or over 500,000 people, rather, under CHMV. That's Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela that were allowed in. CBP One app, there's about 1 million individuals that will be kind of reviewed under this directive as well.
South of the U.S.-Mexico border, Mexican cartels now targeting American companies doing business in Mexico. We are hearing reports of trucks being hijacked, threats of extortion, and employees being forced to look the other way as the cartels are using their companies to move their drugs. NewsNation border correspondent Jorge Ventura joining us live from San Antonio on this. Jorge, what types of workers are being targeted by the cartels?
Well, Natasha, we are learning now that Mexican cartels targeting American companies in Mexico, anywhere from extortion to hijacking, even forcing employees to run drugs for those criminal groups. Now, according to the American Chamber of Commerce in Mexico, 1 in 8 businesses have reported organized criminal organizations taking at least partial control of their operations, whether it's sales, distribution, or pricing. While truck drivers are the most commonly targeted, there has been an uptick in the targeting of executives as well. Using threats of violence, cartels have also embedded themselves in the distribution networks of these companies, and many of their shipments are actually cleared by U.S. Customs, allowing for cartels to slip drugs into these shipments undetected. Now, additional complicating factor in this story is that the Trump administration has recently labeled these Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, which means that anyone who aids them or runs the risk of prosecution themselves, including the death penalty. Also, what's a huge issue the Commerce is reporting is because the cartels do retaliate against those that do report them to law enforcement, they say this is also playing a major factor of Americans not reporting them to Mexican law enforcement. That's a huge deterrent as well, Natasha.
Yeah, Jorge, we appreciate it. I know you've also been tracking this case. The Trump administration, of course, making all these efforts to deport suspected gang members. It appears a Maryland man may have been deported by accident. What can you tell us? What is the latest there?
So right now, the White House is facing a Monday night deadline to return Salvadoran national Kimara Bergo Garcia back to the United States. He's right now being detained at the CCOT maximum prison in El Salvador. Now, a U.S. district judge did rule on Friday, calling that an illegal act in demanding that the administration returns Alberto Garcia back to the United States. The judge in this case is doubling down in response to the government's appeal today, denying that appeal and calling Alberto Garcia's deportation to the maximum security prison, quote, wholly lawlessness. Now, the White House has admitted that Alberto Garcia was deported by mistake, citing an administrative error, but maintaining that he's an MS-13 gang leader.
Fact number 2, we also have credible intelligence proving that this individual was involved in human trafficking. And fact number 3, this individual was a member, actually a leader of the brutal MS-13 gang, which this president has designated as a foreign terrorist organization.
Now, the White House continues to maintain that the return of Alberto Garcia to the United States is not up to them. It'll be up to El Salvador's government. As of now, President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador has not publicly commented on this. This also comes, Natasha, as Bukele is set to visit the White House on April 14th. We'll see if Bukele and President Trump do address the American media on Alberto Garcia's case.
All right, Jorge Ventura live in San Antonio tonight. Thank you.
We've been telling you how illegal border crossings are down, which means Mexican drug cartel activity at the border is also down. But now those transnational criminal organizations are focusing on large-scale drug smuggling operations with evolving strategies. Texas DPS and federal authorities intercepting millions of dollars worth of cocaine in recent high-profile busts under Operation Lone Star. NewsNation's Jorge Ventura is live with the details. Jorge, what is the latest on these efforts?
Well, Nicole, despite a quiet border in terms of the migrant encounters, Mexican cartels are still looking for ways to smuggle massive amounts of drugs into the U.S., aiming for that large payday. Now, take a look at this image here. This is suspect Mario Roberto. He is from Mexico. He was recently arrested this month by Texas DPS special agents and troopers for attempting to smuggle more than 500 pounds of cocaine. The street value of that cocaine is an estimated $6.8 million, according to authorities, a major loss for the cartels. Authorities responded to the FAR port of entry on the Texas border after U.S. Customs and Border Protection suspected a truck, tractor, semi-trailer of narcotics smuggling. After a secondary inspection, authorities recovered 150 plastic-wrapped bundles of cocaine concealed in the vehicle's cargo area. The driver, Mario Roberto, was arrested and charged with manufacturing and delivery of a controlled substance. He was booked in the Hidalgo County Jail. Texas DPS says they are still further investigating this case. Texas DPS also announcing multiple drug seizures along the border. Authorities seized 794 pounds of cocaine worth up to $10.5 million. Texas DPS Lieutenant Chris Oliveira is saying, quote, as illegal border crossings decline, Mexican cartels are increasing drug smuggling efforts. But Border Patrol agents also in California are making big drug seizures as well. This is in the San Diego sector. Agents made major busts this month at a checkpoint. Agents seized 200 pounds of meth, and also in a joint multi-agency operation dubbed Operation Success, Border Patrol agents in that same sector also seized 104 pounds of fentanyl, 390 pounds of cocaine, 535 pounds of meth. That also includes firearms and ammo. That operation leading to at least 20 arrests. So despite cartels being designated as foreign terrorist organizations, Nicole, when it comes to the drug smuggling, either on the border and those checkpoints, that isn't slowing down anytime soon.